Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're expecting a game review here right now, but bear with me just a second. This is very important. I have to get the right filter on this Snapchat selfie. Now, where's the bunny ears? Hey folks, Dre here, and welcome back to the Dreview series, where we review some racing games, old and new. Thanks to everyone that checked out our F1 2016 review a couple of weeks ago, especially those who wrote back angry emails to me saying why I only gave the game a 6.5 rating. I appreciate you guys. Now in episode 2, we're going to be reviewing a Wipeout game! Woohoo! It's Wipeout Fusion on the PS2! Now, believe it or not, this was actually one of the most early PS2 racing games, but also one of the most controversial entries in what's been an established and long reputable racing game franchise, especially those amongst long-time fans. Why is that? Well, why don't you sit down, buckle up, get a nice cool beverage, and let's find out together. Enjoy! Okay, so let's cover the basics here first. Wipeout Fusion was the 5th game in the Wipeout series, released in 2002 by developer Studio Liverpool, formerly known as Psygnosis. If you're watching this video, you probably already know they made a lot of the early licensed Formula 1 games, and one of my favourite racing series ever, Roll Cage. This also includes Formula 1 Championship Edition on the PS3, the go-to we're bored of career mode let's play side bitch from the F1 community. Wipeout was without a doubt a rip-off of the Nintendo's F-Zero series of futuristic anti-gravity rocket ship racing, only major difference being what Wipeout had elements of armed combat involved via weapons. But the series' core was always in 3D visuals, fast-paced gameplay, and a shit ton of EDM, or as I like to call it, dubstep before it went mainstream. And if you think Formula 1 and IndyCar is fast, you haven't seen Wipeout, man. Speeds in excess of 500 miles an hour, and that's not before you take those blue-coloured speed pads into account. The multicolour pads were power-up pads, where you got to use weapons such as targeted missiles, autopilots, grenades, Wipeout Fusion exclusive, rockets, and more. Combine all of that and you have one of the most difficult to master racing franchises out there, and it still holds up nearly 15 years later in the case of Fusion. Now, Fusion was the first game in the series on the PS2, and for an early game for the console, it holds up pretty well, making good use of the console's power. It's easy to get disillusioned given today's 1080p 60p wave playing, but it's still very solid here. Sadly, the game does suffer from some frame rate drops when the gameplay is at its most intense, but it's only in very short periods, and it's only really a trivial issue. Given the game's ridiculous speed a lot of the time, I'm okay with that. The game has 9 different locations listed throughout Earth, with a little bit of space thrown in, and they're based in certain stereotypical locales, such as Alcavexis in a rainforest setting, Cubis float in the Arctic zone surrounded by ice, or Vol Square taking place in the city streets at night. They're nothing inspiring, but they hold up well enough. Again, unlike previous games in the series, each track had 6 different configurations, 3 forwards and those same 3 in reverse. So there's a potential 48 different layouts of track available, but I can't lie to you, it does get pretty repetitive quickly, especially given some of the circuits are very difficult and not particularly fun to navigate. The game also has 8 different teams to choose from as your ship, each with their own unique characteristics. For instance, Pfizer are the teams with the best handling and lateral stability, while Piranha specialise in ridiculously high top speeds. But for the first and only time in the history of the series, you could earn credits to upgrade your ship in areas like shielding from damage, thrust, top speed and weapon power. Gone were the speed colossus in the other games, Venom, Flash, Rapier and Phantom. Your team was split into 2 pilots, a second pilot and a lead. Once you had upgraded the second pilot's ship to 75%, you could unlock the lead pilot, which had better overall stats. Sorry, Nico Rosberg. I love this aspect of the game. You could make each craft unique to you, and because there was no tax on up and down grading, you had the flexibility to experiment to find the right combination for you. The only major downside for me is that only 3 of the 8 teams are available from the start: Pfizer, Vanuber and G-Tech, formerly Kyrex, and the former 2 are actually somewhat similar, just Vanuber has really shitty shields that doesn't exactly help. You can unlock the rest of the league by playing through the game's main mode, the AG League. The premise is pretty simple. Work your way up through the game's set leagues, which contain a minimum of 3 races, and they get more complex and bigger as you progress.
score a gold medal, and you rise through the ranks, and along the way compete in one-on-one contests against the new team's second pilots in order to unlock a new team. You also earn credits in the races themselves for how fast you were, how much damage you dish out, and so on. The natural progression is genuinely rewarding, and you don't have to grind too much to fully upgrade a craft, which is nice. So how does Wipeout Fusion play? It's an intense experience for sure. As said before, ships are extremely fast and you need good reflexes and mastery of the controls to play effectively, including using individual air brakes on either side of the ship to steer, a lot like F-Zero, or MotoGP games and controlling individual brakes. You have to concentrate as the game is very fast, but Fusion is unlike other games in the series because there's a greater emphasis on combat across the board. Weapons have a much greater disruptive effect, and some weapons like the Gravity Bomb and Stinger can slow you down to a crawl. And understandably, many fans of the franchise, me included, didn't like how it affected the flow of the game. Which leads me to arguably the most controversial subject regarding Wipeout Fusion: the physics model. Allow me to explain. You see, in previous Wipeout games, if you hit a wall, you'd lose almost all of your speed and take quite a lot of damage to your craft. In Fusion, they decided to be a lot more forgiving. In this case, if you hit a wall in Fusion, instead of bouncing off it, you'd simply grind on the walls, and you wouldn't even lose that much speed by comparison. Me personally, I'm kind of indifferent on this, but I can understand why a lot of Wipeout purists would be annoyed how fundamentally different the game handles, as you're just not rewarded in the same way for navigating circuits cleanly like in other games in the series. Despite those potential problems, I still took a lot of satisfaction in driving cleanly, given the Wipeout series is definitely one of precision. You need to be accurate in order to stay up the front, but there's also an element of aggression needed because, as said before, the game has a strong element of combat too. For instance, in the AG League you score 12 points for a win, 10 for second, 8 for third, etc, but you also score 2 points for eliminating or destroying another craft. But you yourself score 0 for the race if you are destroyed. So if you're willing to roll the dice and get your hands dirty, there's a nice element of risk and reward to it. Now, something I wanted to talk about here as well is that Fusion doesn't get anywhere near enough credit for its level of lore and subtle storytelling within the game. If you're willing to dig a little deeper at things like team descriptions on challenge mode, some of the artwork in the game and so on, you can piece together a cool little landscape of the world that Wipeout Fusion was set in the F9000 era. An era where the sports costs were spiralling out of control because of development amongst teams, remind you of anybody, and repairing wrecked ships, for instance with the Oricom and Tigron feud. Oricom's ideals following Pierre Belmondo's, where racing was about the enhancement of tech as opposed to profit, where Tigron believed in violence and crushing the opposition via any means necessary. Apparently their lead pilot was once promised his own diamond farm if he could shut down Oricom permanently.
Heck, there's even the story of Natasha Belmondo, a descendant of Pierre Belmondo, the godfather of AG technology, who defected from her family's ideals at Oricom after winning an early title there to join Zyos in order to win more championships. Which she did. Remind you of anyone? Anywho, it turns out she'd actually go on to become chairman of the Anti-Gravity Racing Commission in the FX300 League scene in Wipeout Pure, spearheaded by her, leader of the new Belmondo Foundation, essentially bringing anti-gravity racing back into the mainstream. See? Who said women couldn't make it in motorsport?
So as I said, if you're willing to dig a little bit deeper, there's some cool shit to be found, and I love that it's something that sports games like FIFA and NBA 2K are only just tapping into again, a resurgence from this era in the early 21st century. It's pretty awesome. And I have to mention, there's a common theme with the Wipeout games in general. Their soundtracks are amazing, and Fusion's are no exception. A brilliant blend of electronic, D&B and techno, a perfect accompanying side dish to the main course of gameplay itself. I absolutely recommend downloading it from totally legal sources. Wasn't Napster still a thing in 2002? So what else does Fusion have? Well, it has challenge mode where every team has 5 different short one-off events where passing them unlocks their team's super weapon, with all golds unlocking an extra difficult 6th mission with super low shielding. Then you have zone mode, my personal favourite mode in the game, where you're locked into a really weak ship with the accelerator jammed on and having to survive as ships get faster and faster the longer you go on. It's a great mode and one for the masochists out there, but it also exposes this game's biggest problem. its unlock system. I mentioned earlier that only 3 of the 8 teams are available from the start, and while I can forgive that one, the other unlockables I can't. You have to complete 30% of the game's gold medals in order to unlock Zone Mode. And that's quite the grind, and the average player will most likely be dropping 8 to 12 hours of gameplay in to unlock it. But then time trial isn't an option until you achieve 60% game completion, and that for me is ludicrous. A staple of any racing game needs 60% of the game completed to unlock it. Something that many average players will probably never accomplish. That's stupid to me and completely unnecessary. Zone I can understand, but time trial? Nah. But hey, on the bright side, this game has cheats. Remember them? Very cool. Here's one to get you started. Triangle, circle, circle, triangle, X. Thank me later.
So what do I think of Fusion overall? Well, here's the crux of it for me. Don't treat this game like a Wipeout game. Treat it as a racing game, and I think a lot of the cynicism regarding this entry into a historic series kind of gets washed away. I think it's a game that still holds up very well nearly 15 years on, and I praise Studio Liverpool for doing something different with this one, and the majority of the vast changes in the game I actually really like. So props to them to it. God, I miss Studio Liverpool so much. I miss them so. Anyway, just before I go, I want to give a massive shout out to Hellfire WZ. I got a lot of the lore described in this video from his videos and his amazing work on the series in general. Check him out if you haven't already. In the corner will be a video that he made some time ago about all the individual teams in Wipeout. It's about 40 minutes long, but it's absolutely well worth the watch. The hidden amount of depth in this series is actually something that I find mind-blowing and incredible. So absolutely check it out if you can. Anyway, if you played Fusion, what did you think of it? Let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. As always, I've been Andre Harrison, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.